So tell us, Todd, why Postback? Why are you here? Why are you speaking to us?
I typically like to go where the people are. So this is this is as rich environment as it is for talking about what's going on in the industry and talking about how we're thinking about things as we look forward.
I'd love to just really quickly touch on sort of your career and kind of how you found yourself here in this position at Apple.
Well, I mean, everybody's got a phone, so you can look up and see kind of my background, so I won't drone on about that. But I would say, if I were to say one thing about how I got here, I think it was really just being fortunate to be involved with a bunch of people doing interesting things during a time of hypergrowth. Right? So if you think about, when I first jumped into Yahoo and then into Quantcast and then Adobe and Apple, it was one of those opportunities where these companies were all doing amazing things, and to be part of teams aspiring to do really big things for the industry, I think that's how I ended up here. I think it was, you can call it, luck, you can call it all kinds of different things, but I think the fundamental core is just being with great people who are trying to do great things.
And so talk about what it's like now building an advertising product at Apple, who's historically a device product, software product. Yep. This is kind of new territory in certain ways.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different because the lens is slightly different, right? I mean, you brought up specifically, right? Apple is a hardware, software, services company that its main focus is creating really great customer experiences, and it pursues that to all ends. And sometimes those things come in conflict with what you would expect traditionally, right, in building a core advertising business as a platform. But I think what was inspiring about this and what Apple's trying to do is really to think differently about it. How do we create a great advertising environment for our customers, right, where they find value in it, and where our developers can leverage tools and capabilities to create value for themselves. So I think that's the core of what's it like to build a product at Apple. It's a privilege to be on, just straight. It's a privilege because the aspiration is great, and sometimes the solutions aren't exactly clear as to how you're going to achieve the objective. But there's a core mission, and a core desire to build great products and services for the customer, and that kind of keeps us focused, and we don't stop until that's right.
Can you tell us how it's going so far? Like, what does it look like, and over the last year or so?
Well, I think over the last year, last year was a really interesting one for us because we pivoted. A lot of you remember our old ad network that we used to run, and we pivoted away from that because we figured as we looked that there were other ways that we could deploy our resources to create even more value. We felt like the ecosystem was really strong in providing network-like services, and so we figured we could pivot ourselves. And the last year was really about that pivot. It was about, I should say the last 2 years, because we've been operating search ads now for a year. That pivot was really around shifting our focus to how we could create greater discovery for apps, discovery for our customers to find new apps that will make their lives better, but then also creating the opportunity for developers to build a bigger business on our platform. We already have a great platform for building a business if you're a developer, but we're constantly looking to push that. Discovery is kind of the key thread there. How do we help get these businesses discovered by customers across the globe? And so I think, how's it going? I think we got off to a great start with search ads. The metrics are fantastic, and what I mean by metrics, customers, the end users of the devices are responding really well. That was one of my core concerns, right? Anytime you put an advertising product,
put an ad in front of a person.
Yeah, anytime you put an ad, you wonder what kind of backlash you're going to get. Are they going to like it? Have you done a good enough job to make them actually feel satisfied, right, that you took up their screen space? And I think we're off to a good start with that. I mean, we see now on average across the platform over 50% conversion rates, which means 50% of the time, right, that a user is engaging with an ad, they're converting, they're downloading the app. And that's a good place to start from, because you can build a lot of value off of that for the developer. So I think we're happy, but we're still not where we think we ultimately can be. We've got a ton of work left on the horizon.
Still early days. I
Yeah.
mean, certainly at Tune, we've enjoyed watching that growth and seeing marketers build out as a channel and really think about what it looks like for their user experience and that sort of thing. And I do want to talk about one controversial thing here, and that is branded search, right? So bidding on a competitor's brand name. Obviously, it was kind of brought to our attention as it was in the early days of the launch that, oh well, I'm seeing that someone's bidding on my brand name that's my competitor, and they're coming up even though someone searched for me. So how does Apple think about that in the search experience?
Yeah, so it goes back to those tenets that I said earlier. Discovery was the number one thing. How do we create this better discovery in the store, which then in turn enables our customers to find the apps that they want, developers to build a better business. And so if you take that as your kind of guiding principle, where we arrived was that all terms need to be able to be bidded on. Because if your goal is really to provide greater discovery, that means everything is open, everything is fair game, and there aren't special holdouts for special reasons. And so as part of that, if you're going to do something like that, then what you need to make sure you also do is you need to make sure there's a level playing field, right? You need to ensure that you're not allowing big developers to come in and squat, and push out little developers. And so you need to make sure that there's a fair, open marketplace for everyone to compete. And so one of the core foundations of search ads is a relevance algo that's tight. We take great pride in making sure that, if you are searching, on a specific type of app, that someone from an entirely different genre or category can't come in just because they have more money and sit on top of that term. And so
still relevancy.
Relevancy is the core, right? You don't even get into the auctions unless you first pass our relevancy bars, and that bar varies, obviously, depending on the type of term, because what we're really hinging on is we want to make sure discovery happens. And so yes, there are some people who have had issues on the branded term side, and when I say issues, the concern is, hey, why are you letting people bid on my brand term? Again, it comes back to that discovery. Those cases, to be honest, I'll tell you up here are important. We hear them, but at the same time, there's a very small number of them. And our core, we keep coming back to our core, which is discovery is what matters. Open playing field, discovery, and relevance.
So, running ads with Apple actually is pretty economical at the moment. You're able to really keep these CPIs and CPAs in check. Talk to us about how that works and why that is so competitive at the moment.
I think the first thing, not to kind of take, the thing I can't take credit for is the store is a great place to to serve an ad, right? At the end of the day, every customer there is there to get an app.
So why not charge more?
Right. so and that kind of comes back to the again back to we are making it a transparent, open platform. We're not sticking in these to your point, charging more, bidding people up. It is a true second price auction that people participate in, and so back to the why is it performing well. I think one, this is where the fish are, right? People are looking to download an app, and so if you're looking to get your app downloaded, this is probably the best, and I would argue certainly the best and likely the most efficient thing that you'll start with is being in the App Store. From there, relevance is, I think, what helps maintain the CPAs and the CPIs. I mean, when you're able to convert at a 50% conversion rate, that helps a lot, versus when you're chasing around a 2% conversion rate, right? These things, it's just math at the end of the day, and so I think 50% conversion rates help that.
That makes sense. I mean, certainly because that scale is available because of the conversion rate, you're able to really keep it at a low bar, which is really cool.
That's right, and we're just getting started. I mean, one of the things, over the year, one of the things that a lot of people have also remarked about is that we've been able to maintain these CPIs fairly well throughout the last year, even as more people have come into the market. And the reason for that, people have asked us how we've been able to do that. Yes, they've gone up slightly, but on the average average on the platform, it hasn't gone up more than probably about 20%. And so you ask the question, why is that, even when there's so much more bidding and participation in the market? And the reason for that is we're constantly finding new inventory, right? New words that match to new apps as this marketplace develops. We're seeing, the baseline, of the product was all about what was happening in the App Store. Well, if you were a small app and you weren't being downloaded that often, but all of a sudden you get on the search ads and we find that there's 50 other terms that actually people will download your app off of, right? Because we're testing and we're learning. This constantly builds on itself. And so that's one of the things that we're seeing is we're bringing more and more inventory in as we learn, test, and expand for each individual app itself. I think that also helps keep the CPIs low because our algo is constantly evolving.
So search is pretty near and dear to my heart.
Yep.
I actually got started in SEO, just in my pajamas at home, like most of us. and so obviously this is fascinating to me to think about how do I optimize the experience for people to find my app or find my website. And Tune has our own App Store analytics product to start showing like how do you optimize for search in the App Store. I've got a two-part question about this. One, how do you guys feel about developers trying to optimize for that, trying to rank for keywords and things like that? And then how do you think about the relationship of that organic search then to the paid side and what correlations you see between those?
First of all, App Store optimization is the #1 thing you should focus on as you're thinking about how your product's being positioned. I'm not saying that as a plug. I'm saying that as if you want to be effective in search ads, I'll just be selfish for a minute. If you want to be successful in search ads and your metadata that you've put into the store is mediocre, your images are average, these things all contribute to the success that you'll have in search ads. And so, so part of this,
sort of establishing some of that relevancy on your own.
Absolutely, is establish some relevancy on your own. And one of the things that we've done is we've made a tremendous amount of information and data available in search ads. I think people were surprised by that because this was the first time that we had provided transparency to keyword information, right, from the store. And I think that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, it's really helped. To be honest, it's made developers smarter about their business, right? And that in turn leads to better positioning. That in turn then leads to greater discovery. And so we start from a base of what's in the App Store, and then we grow off of that based on what we see, what we experience, what we test, and learn with on the back end. But always start there. And then I would say it also works the other way. Many of our developers are using search ads to not only learn and feed their ASO, but they're also using search ads and are seeing success in driving organic as well. Because obviously the way organic works is it looks at relevancy based on downloads. And so when you're pushing, that's one of the many things. If you're pushing search ads and you're seeing downloads, many of our developers have come back and said, wow, there's actually a cross effect that we didn't plan. We didn't instrument it that way. It's just happening.
Yeah, it's good to hear. It would make sense that this is the same user experience, the same kind of relevancy we're driving for. We're just going to enhance, amplify that as much as we can, right?
That's right.
So before I switch into a topic that kind of dives into some new things and some new facts, I do want to have one last topic on this sort of experience of search ads.
Okay.
How have you seen marketers or app developers leverage search ads in a unique way? Maybe done something that other marketers haven't quite tried out before, or thought about it as it relates to their business in some way that's unique.
Well, I think there's a ton, right? I'll give you a couple just off the top, some recent stuff. We've got a bunch of case studies too on the site if you guys want to go check them out. There's some cool stuff that developers are doing. One, an indie developer out of the UK, Postback. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They are effectively an app that processes greeting cards and sends you a physical greeting card through the mail. So you can use your own camera when you're out and about in Seattle and send off a postcard in physical state to a friend. Pretty cool. So what they did, which was interesting, is they were based in the UK. They said, wow, what a great opportunity for us when Apple launches search ads to have, you know, a new platform in the App Store where we can put ourselves at the top. And they had no presence in the US, so they scrambled. They built up fulfillment in the U.S. They got their app done and ready in the U.S. and they launched, and they started using search ads. And you know, the stats are great. You know, they've grown their user base by 75%. You know, they've grown revenue by 300%. There's story after story like that. That's what's fun about this business, is because you can see real impact on developers. You know, and it applies for the big guys too.
Takes some creativity.
It does.
Yeah.
You know, it takes testing and learning. You know, you know, but you know, the worst is if you sit on the sideline, right? And you know, big developers, one of the things that they've started to understand is that doing cross-promotion off of their brand term works really well and is a really highly effective way for them to drive downloads of new apps. So we've got some big game developers who have been doing that recently.
I saw that with Walgreens the other day. I did a Walgreens search, and the Walgreens photo app actually was promoted above it. And I downloaded that one, and it was easier.
Yep. So
to do what I needed it to do.
So people are leveraging their own brand equity to try to promote new products and services as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's another area, right? You know, I think you know, now everything's not rosy. I'll give you an example of, you know, what hasn't worked as well that we're working on, you know, really intensely, is I think we need to make some of our interaction, right, in our UI better. You know, I think, you know,
simpler the better.
Simpler the better,
for sure. Yeah.
Exactly, right? You know, and I think we've got a little bit of work to do there. Yeah. And so, you know, we've heard loud and clear. We fielded a bunch of research back from all of our developers. We had an amazing response rate. You know, it was, you know, 5x kind of the industry average, and everyone just gave us all these great ideas, and we're like, this is wonderful. You know, it's like, it's great to have a customer base that cares. And so, you know, we're working hard right now to put into our product, you know, a lot of the messages that we receive back. You know, I think simpler, faster, you know, just get us more information about our customer. And so we're working on all that intently, so you'll see that as the year marches on.
And it's great to know that you guys are listening.
Oh, absolutely.
The feedback's coming through. And on this next topic, this is particularly an area where, okay, we've kind of established this mobile marketing industry. We kind of understand how to, you know, get people to download the app and do re-engagement and like how to pay for these things and how to reconcile these things. So now we've kind of come to this point. You guys continue to take feedback, you know, from the industry about what else you might be able to bring to the table. And so let's jump to the topic that is maybe closest and nearest and dearest to my heart, and that's measurement and attribution. So Apple has so much data about the behavior of consumers, and it would be helpful if we could get a few more insights into what's happening with installs. How many of you have a discrepancy between your downloads in the Apple interface and what you see in your Tune dashboard? It should be all of you. I mean, come on, it's real. But so how are you guys thinking about that and approaching this and maybe bringing some more transparency to the industry? Yeah.
So one of the things we were surprised, right, when we started hearing about these discrepancies, because we're like, how can there be discrepancies, right? We're the App Store. Like, we have all the data. We know exactly.
We know the answer.
We know who clicked on the ad, who downloaded the app. We know exactly when that happened. We know, and we have validation of like their credit card. I mean, we have everything about this person, right? So, you know, as we dug into it, because we're like, this isn't acceptable, right? We can't have, right, an industry and a marketplace that doesn't understand what's going on. So we dug into it. And so starting from the foundation, right, which we run the entire App Store off this foundation, this data foundation, we know the truth, right? And so we started backing and went and worked directly with the guys at Tune to understand and say, all right, where are you and where are we? And I think up on the slide, I want to talk through and give everyone here some insight as to what's going on.
Which, by the way, this is the first time anyone has seen this.
Right. So take a look. I'm sure this will make its way around. So when you look at the App Store, right, I talked about how we've got the source of truth for all downloads that happen. And in the App Store, actually, from search, roughly a little bit more than 65% of all downloads do happen as a result of a search in the store. So we're starting from a great base of knowledge of what happens. Every install that happens through us. And so we knew that our foundation was strong. So then we started looking and said, well, what's different? Well, there's a couple things that are different that we see that no one else sees. So for example, there are two big things. One is limit ad tracking and then app deletion. Those two things in and of themselves are things that the developer ultimately and third parties can't see. And so if we set up the way the industry has created third-party tracking, right, is it's used the app open as the source of truth. And the app
install.
The install, right? That's what everybody calls the install, but it's actually the app open. And so what happens when you go from the app open backwards is there's a couple of things, and I'll explain the big one in a minute. There's a couple of things that you don't really have the ability to know. So first, limit ad tracking. There are about 15 to 20% of customers on the Apple platform that have slid that switch to on. And what that means is that their data can be used for aggregation purposes, so you see it in the UI on search ads, but we are unable to pass through that individual information at the individual level through the attribution API because they have selected to be anonymous, okay? So that means that a third-party platform like Tune, when they call the API, they essentially will not see those users coming from us because we say they don't exist. However, they show up in our UI because we know they exist, we know they're legitimate users, we have their credit card, we know they're downloading apps. So that's effectively, if you look at your first bullet here, right, the first reduction from what we report versus what you see on the outside. The second big jump, which is a really interesting one and I think is actually going to be a paradigm shift for the entire industry, is there's a material amount of people who are downloading apps that are actually re-downloading apps that they have previously deleted. And so that is a really interesting revelation because right now, the way the developer sees it, because the developer, we don't give them a signal for understanding that someone deleted an app. We think that's a private thing that the user has, and we don't pass that through to the developer. So the developer, when they see that app open again for the second time, they actually think that that's their existing customer, when actually that customer had deleted the app. That's a big number. You can see here in the second bullet, we go from 25,000 down to now we're at 15,000, right, installs that are being seen by the third-party platform because the developer thinks that they're an existing customer, but they're not. They're people that have deleted the app. That rate, this is kind of average. I put up an average. That rate can be as high as 60%. Depending on what type of app you have. And you might say, well, what is that like?
That's a lot of deleting and installing. What's going on?
How is that possible?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. A type of app that has a higher deletion rate is, if you think about it, dating apps. You go, you secure, a new date. It turns into a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and you delete the app because you're in a good spot. 2 months go by, and you're no longer in a good spot, and so you got to download the app again. And so
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So the reason this is a paradigm shift is because this is something now that I think developers are going to have to work through, and we want to provide this information out. We're going to work with Tune to really, how do we get this information and expose this in the UI in a way that helps developers understand this? I don't purport to make an assertion about what's the value of that. That's up to the developer to decide. But this gives you an idea now why, if you are seeing a discrepancy, effectively what these discrepancies reduce down to. The final thing, which is small up here, just to kind of put it for comprehensiveness, is there is an open latency. And I'll give you an idea about of that. So at a macro level, just to give you some more stats that we haven't put out before, is from search ads, 90% of apps are downloaded effectively immediately after the click. Another 8%, so getting you to 98% of all downloads from search ads come within 3 hours. Why that difference between the 3 hours and the immediate? Because people get distracted. People get a notification, they click into whatever the latest notification was, they drop a cell connection, maybe they have to type in their password, they forgot their password because they hadn't downloaded an app in a while. There's all kinds of different stuff that creates that latency there. So you're left with about 2% of people that then occupy a window that's beyond 3 hours. Now let me process that last piece backwards. So if you look at app opens, right, app opens, sometimes it takes greater than 2 weeks for someone to actually open an app.
Which is why we have these attribution windows that are much longer.
Exactly. And what we see is 30 days is a really good window where you pretty much capture the vast majority of legitimate kind of opens and usage of your app. And that's why we report on a 30-day. But I think
That's interesting because we see a similar number, from Google and Facebook. But most of the rest of the industry is kind of held to a 7-day window.
That's right. And so I put it out there just to be careful that you're not losing value and losing an understanding of LTV because a lot of people, and it was surprising to me, this behavior of I download it and I don't open it. Now, let me give you one example of how that might happen. Branded search terms are a really good example where we see people on one search term will download 2 apps. They saw a new app that they had never run across in the branded search environment. They download that, then they download the app they were originally searching for, right? Get into that one, and then they come back later and open the new one that they had found. And so you start to see how these things tie together. And so I just would be careful and make sure you set your attribution windows so you're really truly understanding value.
So let's talk about the download.
Yeah.
What's the possibility to figure out, like, can we attribute a download versus an open, and what that data is going to look like down the track here?
Well, I think as of right now, right, developers have the ability to call our API, right, on the opens and get a timestamp and get an idea of the keyword, right, that was searched on. And by the way, one of the things that we're seeing as a best practice that some developers are doing is they actually call the API at different points during the app process, because what they're looking for is to understand nuances of the keywords for their most engaged customers. And so a lot of developers just deploy it on the open, but some people are actually doing it on different windows of segmentation that they've created in their app. And that's something I know you guys have been looking at. And so I think there are interesting opportunities there for you to really understand what's going on. But back to the kind of the download. So today, one of the things that we obviously offer today is we offer we report the conversions, which are downloads. They're confirmed downloads. You guys have the opens. We are very interested in exposing that data that you saw out into the third-party platforms. And the reason we want to do that is because trust is the important foundation, right, of the marketing industry. And to be honest, of any industry, whether it's tech or not, I mean, trust is a fundamental foundation. And so we want that trust to be there, and we've got ways that we can do it in a very privacy-centric way, according to Apple standards, that we're already doing through our API. And so we'll use the existing framework to do a lot of that.
We're really excited to be working forward with you guys on that. Getting back to what happens from download to open and forward. Let's talk just a minute about the reinstall thing as well.
Okay.
How are you guys thinking about relaying that or connecting that to the industry? And
we want to, right? So
okay.
full stop. We want to. We need to figure out how to construct the pipes.
Right.
So in the short term, it might be as simple as us exposing it in the UI so that there will be this ability to do the reconciliation. In the longer term, we want that data to flow so that people understand that. But we need to work through some of those details. And so, again, our core, we want to be transparent, but we also are going to honor the privacy requests. And so, one of the things that we we won't obviously get to is where we start passing information on people who are LAT because they've requested us not to. That is an active request from a customer, and so the industry is going to have to deal with a 15 to 20% rate of LAT, but we'll be able to expose that for you in the UI, so that you can see it in the aggregate. Yeah.
Well, because it is different depending on the kind of demographic that an app might touch.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That will vary, depending on the apps. And you can make all kinds of your own. What do LAT people do differently than non-LAT people? But it's a little bit different, but not widely different. Like I would say, your bound on that is probably 10% to 25%.
I could literally talk about this stuff forever. One more thing I want to dig into just kind of on this subject is the topic of uninstalls. One of the issues that we have seen, and honestly the reason we don't report on uninstalls, is because the primary way of doing so is by sending a silent push to a user. So if a user has push enabled and you send them a push, you can get an error that says, oh, that push didn't go through, so therefore they must have uninstalled the app. So it's kind of a hack. It's kind of a way to kind of work around this. But there are a lot of problems with it, obviously, in terms of the accuracy, based on how many people might have turned off push and other things that come through. So how do you, what's kind of the state of the union on uninstalls? How do you guys, I know you mentioned it briefly a minute ago, but what do you think about that and what it means to the industry? Well,
I think we still think it's important that users have their privacy, right? And so if they choose to delete an app, that's not something that we're actively pushing through, because that's their choice, right? It's their device, and we don't need to be sending signals off,
they uninstalled, send them an email.
Yeah, exactly, kind of exactly, because that's where that goes.
That's the natural thing.
Right, that's where that goes. If we enable something like that, then it's basically a food fight, where all of a sudden emails go, please come back, we love you, and now the annoyance factor goes up.
Well, and how valuable of a stat do you think it is? Because we've kind of thought about it as, well, if they've ghosted out, they've ghosted out. It doesn't matter if the app's on the phone or not. But the reinstall part of it, I think, is particularly
that's the key, right? Just knowing what your rate might be, I think is the majority of the battle. And if you can understand what your rate might be, and then you can understand that this was actually a reinstall, then you can start triangulating in on is what's unique about all of my audience that has reinstalled, right? Because what's unique about them might be a key to really understanding why are people churning out. So while it's not a direct, we're not giving you the exact people, right? Your reinstall number will help you understand the kind of what does the population of people look like that might be churning out, and it might tell you a little bit about your app.
Let's get into a quick lightning round. We don't have a lot of time left. So instant apps.
Yep.
You've heard of this?
Yes.
What do you think?
Look, the app ecosystem hasn't been more vibrant at this point in time, right? I mean, it's growing. Users love it. The experiences are amazing. You just saw us, with our new announcements at WWDC. I think it only gets even more robust, right, as some of these new technologies come out. You saw ARKit. That's exciting. Does that mean that services won't be distributed throughout the apps, or might not be distributed throughout the app ecosystem? I mean, we've obviously started building open kits where people can plug in, right, to the ecosystem into the iOS in different ways. So I think it's both, right? Do I think you're going to see everything pivot out of apps? Absolutely not. I mean, the experiences in apps are amazing, and the thought of recreating those in a streaming environment, I think that's I think that's hard to imagine.
So it is two different environments, right? We're talking about native and streaming.
That's right.
That's really what it is.
That's exactly right. And so, I think, the question, we'll see how this evolves. But right now our users love apps. Like, we don't see a barrier to app download. Wi-Fi's there. People are bringing it in, and it's only gotten more robust over time.
That's interesting. I mean, especially maybe for like utilities and things like that, you could see some streaming services because there's not a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can see where some of this stuff might make sense, right? You know, and you can see already integrations happening between developers, right? Right, where they're integrating with each other, right? And that's interesting as well. You know, and so, you know, I think, you know, that I think the future of how this all looks, you know, we'll all see it together.
So that kind of brings me to web, the other side.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of our premises has been that web is an opportunity for scale when there is a lot of saturation of apps, when people have 50, 60 apps on their phone at times. So lowering the barrier to educate, build awareness, build preference, right, through the web seems like an opportunity. How do you guys think about sort of the growth or shrinking of web interactions?
I don't think we think about the shrinking or growth. We think they're both viable, right? I mean, as far as a great environment, you know, the iOS native experience is a great environment. They're used for different things.
Separate yet equal.
You know, we've got teams that, you know, create really great you know, products and services in that area, and so we don't think of one or the other as being, you know, better or worse. They both provide unique things. You know, just like, you know, we started providing out more and more capabilities to developers. You know, it's important for us to grow the way our customers want their experiences to grow, right? And we'll keep doing that.
Is there anything that you can tell us that's just kind of coming down the road, you know, maybe later this year, or anything that we can be looking forward to?
Well, I talked a little bit about just, you know, we listen pretty intently. Our roadmaps are built partly, obviously, off of that survey that we did with all of our customers. That's really important for us, and we tie you know, our roadmaps to that. You know, on a more kind of macro looking forward level, you know, I think discovery is the number one. We're going to continue pushing discovery. We're going to continue pushing inventory into the system. We're going to continue being better at matching, right? You know, so that we expose more opportunities for apps to get downloaded. You know, the thing we started this year and we're going to just continue pushing forward on is our international expansion. So you're going to see us come to more markets, you know, as we get comfortable that we have the right quality product in that market. And so we launched first the 2 English markets, I'm sorry, 3, UK, Australia, and New Zealand, and we'll be expanding out to more markets throughout the rest of this year and years to come, because that's our goal. Our goal is to create discovery for our customers and help our developers build businesses, and that's what they want. This
has been really great, has it not? Can you please give him a round of applause, an early round of applause? Just one final thought. What are you, Todd Teresi, most proud of so far that your teams at Apple have accomplished? Your teams.
My teams.
Your peeps.
My peeps. My specific teams.
Yeah.
You know, I'm most pleased with them taking on the challenge, right, of building this platform for developers, right? I mean, we were a team that was primarily focused on Apple News and display advertising in the network, and you know, I'm really proud that this team came out and put together a product that's, you know, working really well for developers and is really democratizing access, you know, to discovery and you know, for our customers. So I think I'm really proud of them coming together and doing that, and I think doing it in a way that wasn't a copycat, that actually created a unique experience, had some very unique things that made it a level playing field, and I think that thoughtfulness, you know, I'm proud of that thoughtfulness.
Well, I have to say we've all really enjoyed watching it grow as well. Todd, thank you so much for coming out to Postback.
Cool, man.
Cheers. Thank you.